Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
Excited to be here.
Today we're tackling a topic that I'll admit I didn't even know was a thing until I read this article.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, pressured speech in adults with autism.
Interesting.
Our source is an article called "The Pressures on Understanding Pressured Speech in Adult Autism,"
Oh,
and
yes.
it really opened my eyes to like a whole dimension of autism I hadn't really considered before.
I think a lot of people tend to lump all communication differences in autism together.
Right, exactly. Like I knew about difficulties with like eye contact and social cues,
Right.
but pressured speech, that's like
Yeah, it's its own
a
unique.
whole other thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to like unpack it. Like what's going on there?
Well, and it's one of those things where once you start to understand it, you kind of start to see it everywhere, and it
Yeah.
can really change how you interact with people.
I bet.
So maybe a good place to start is just to clarify what exactly we're talking about because, we can't assume everyone's on the same page.
Mhm.
So pressured speech, imagine someone talking very rapidly, intensely, often quite loudly.
Ooh.
But it's not just being a fast talker. It's driven by this overwhelming urge to speak, almost like they can't control the flow of words coming out.
It's like the words are bursting out of them.
Yes, exactly.
Not just a choice to talk fast, but it's like they have to get it all out.
Exactly. It's like there's a pressure there. And the article really dives into why this happens, connecting it back to, the broader experience of autism.
Yeah.
And one of the major factors they talk about is sensory overload.
Okay.
Now think about, how sensitive you might be to certain sounds or textures.
Yeah.
Now amplify that by 10 or even more.
Oh, wow.
And that's kind of a glimpse into what many autistic individuals experience on a daily basis, just like a constant bombardment of sensory input.
I can't even imagine.
Sights, sounds, smells, even the feeling of clothes on their skin. It can all be intensely overwhelming. And for some people, pressured speech is almost like a release valve for that pent-up sensory tension.
Okay, so it's like they're trying to like decompress by
Yeah, it's like a way to,
getting all those words out.
just release that pressure that's building up.
It's like when I get stressed, I pace around and talk to myself. Obviously not quite the same thing,
Right.
but that need to like release that pressure through action, I kind of get it.
Yeah,
But the article mentioned some other causes too, right?
it did. Yeah, sensory overload is just one piece of the puzzle.
Okay.
Another really big one is social anxiety.
Mm.
We all feel awkward sometimes, right?
Oh, for sure.
But imagine that feeling magnified like tenfold in social situations where you're constantly worried about saying the wrong thing,
Oh.
not understanding the unspoken rules, feeling out of sync with everyone else.
Yeah.
For some people, pressured speech becomes a way of trying to fill those gaps, almost like a verbal shield against that discomfort.
I never thought of it that way,
Yeah.
but it makes sense.
It's like a way to kind of control the situation.
Yeah. And that ties into something you mentioned earlier about how understanding this can really change how we interact with people.
Absolutely.
Like if you know that someone's rapid speech might be rooted in anxiety,
Right.
not rudeness or, something else.
It completely shifts your perspective.
It totally does.
Yeah.
And then there was a third factor the article talked about that got a little bit more into like the brain stuff.
Yes, executive functioning.
Yeah.
This is basically the brain's control center for, planning, organizing thoughts, managing impulses.
Like the CEO of the brain.
Exactly.
Good.
And, many autistic individuals have differences in how the system works.
Right.
And that can create a kind of internal pressure that can manifest as pressured speech.
So it's like their thoughts are racing
Yes.
and the words are trying to keep up.
Exactly. Like they're trying to catch up to all the thoughts that are kind of bouncing around in their head.
Wow. So we've got these three kind of intertwined causes: sensory overload, social anxiety, executive functioning challenges. But the article doesn't just stop at the why, does it?
No, it doesn't.
It goes into like the real world impact of that.
Exactly. And that's where it gets really interesting.
I bet, because that's where it really hits home.
Right, exactly. And, understanding those causes is crucial because it helps us see why pressured speech can have such a profound effect on an autistic person's life.
Okay, so let's dive into that.
Right.
What are some of the ways pressured speech can actually like impact someone's day-to-day experience?
Well, one of the most heartbreaking consequences, and this is something that the article really highlighted, is social isolation.
Oh.
Imagine trying to have a conversation where your words are just tumbling out faster than you can process them,
Uh,
and the other person is giving you confused looks or, just not really following what you're saying.
right.
It's easy to see how that could lead to misunderstandings, negative judgments, and ultimately just a withdrawal from social interactions altogether.
Well,
It's like you want to connect, but it's hard because of the way you're communicating.
we real catch-22.
Yeah, and then it gets even more complicated because the article talks about how pressured speech can also impact anxiety and stress.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's like a double whammy, right?
It is. It's a vicious cycle.
Because the pressure to communicate effectively.
Right.
And then maybe you get negative reactions from people. That
Yeah.
just makes you more anxious.
Exactly. And then that fuels more pressured speech. So it's a really tough cycle to break.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So we've got social isolation, this anxiety, stress cycle. What other effects does the article highlight?
Well, they talk about communication breakdowns,
Yeah.
which, can be more than just frustrating. They can have real consequences.
Yeah.
Like imagine trying to give someone directions or explain something really important,
Uh-huh.
but you're speaking so rapidly that they're missing key details.
Right.
So then misunderstandings happen, conflicts arise.
Yeah.
It can be hard to get your needs met.
It just creates all these problems. It really does. And it can affect everything from simple interactions to job performance to relationships.
Wow, that paints a pretty challenging picture.
It does.
But the article doesn't just leave us hanging on a negative note, does it?
No, not at all. It actually offers some really insightful and actionable strategies for both coping and accommodation.
Okay, I am all ears. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about what can be done.
Yeah.
Where does the article suggest we start?
Well, the article starts with sensory integration techniques, and this is where understanding the neuroscience gets really cool.
Okay.
It's not just about, creating a calmer environment. It's about targeting specific sensory systems that can actually help regulate an autistic person's nervous system.
Oh, wow.
Like, for example, deep pressure input.
Okay.
Think weighted blankets, firm hugs, even squeezing into tight spaces. That can be incredibly grounding for a lot of people because it activates the proprioceptive system,
Proprioceptive.
which is basically how the brain understands where the body is in space. So it's like giving the brain that information it needs to feel safe and organized.
Okay, so it's not just like feeling good. It's like actually
Right.
there's a biological basis for why this works.
Exactly. And, it's not a one-size-fits-all solution.
Right.
Some people might find relief through movement like swimming or swinging, which stimulates the vestibular system,
Vestibular.
another key player in sensory processing. Others might benefit from auditory input like listening to calming music or white noise
Right.
to help kind of filter out distracting sounds.
So it's really about like experimenting and finding what works for each individual.
Exactly.
Which makes me think about the social anxiety piece we talked about earlier. The article suggests social skills training as a way to help with that.
Yes.
But I'm curious, like, what does that actually look like?
Yeah.
Is it about teaching autistic people to like act more neurotypical?
That's a common misconception, but it's actually the opposite.
Right.
Effective social skills training for autistic individuals is really about building self-awareness, understanding social cues, and developing strategies to navigate those situations authentically.
So it's not about like masking
No.
who they are.
It's about empowering them
Got it.
to connect with others in a way that feels genuine and comfortable for them.
I like that a lot. The article mentions some specific approaches like cognitive behavioral therapy and social thinking.
Yeah.
Can you kind of break those down a little bit?
Sure. Cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, basically helps individuals identify and challenge negative thought patterns that contribute to anxiety.
Okay.
So for someone with social anxiety and pressured speech, CBT might involve recognizing, those racing thoughts that trigger that urge to speak rapidly,
Yeah.
and then developing coping mechanisms to slow down and manage those thoughts.
Okay. That makes sense.
Social thinking is another approach that focuses on understanding what are often called the unwritten rules of social interaction. Things like reading body language, inferring other people's thoughts and intentions, and adjusting your communication style based on the social context.
So it's like giving them a roadmap for navigating those like complex social interactions
Exactly.
that a lot of us take for granted.
We do, yeah.
Which makes me think about the third piece we discussed, executive functioning.
Yeah.
You mentioned that challenges in that area can also contribute to pressured speech,
Yes.
but I'm still a little fuzzy on like how those dots connect.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that a little more?
Absolutely. So remember, executive functioning is all about those mental processes that help us control our thoughts and actions.
Mm-hmm.
Things like planning, organizing, focusing attention, regulating emotions.
Right.
All of those fall under the executive functioning umbrella.
Okay.
Now, many autistic individuals experience differences in how these processes work,
Yeah.
and that can create a kind of internal pressure cooker,
Mm.
that can manifest as pressured speech.
Okay. So it's not just about the outward behaviors.
Right.
It's also about what's happening inside the brain.
Exactly.
What are some specific examples of how executive functioning challenges might contribute to pressured speech?
Well, take working memory, for example.
Okay.
That's the ability to hold information in mind while you're processing it.
Right.
So if someone has a difficulty with working memory, they might feel really overwhelmed by just the constant influx of information during a conversation.
Yeah.
And that can lead to a rush of words as they're trying to keep up and process everything.
Oh, that's interesting.
Or consider inhibitory control, which is the ability to filter out distractions and stay focused.
Right.
If someone struggles with inhibitory control, they might have trouble stopping themselves from blurting out thoughts
Uh-huh.
or interrupting others, even if they know it's not socially appropriate.
So it's like their brain is trying to process so much at once,
Yes.
and the pressured speech is like a way of trying to manage that.
It's like an overflow valve
Yeah.
for all that cognitive overload.
I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together. The sensory overload, the social anxiety, the
Yeah.
executive functioning challenges.
It's all connected.
It's a lot more complex than I think most people realize.
It really is, and it's unique to each individual.
Right.
That's why it's so important to approach pressured speech with empathy and understanding,
Yeah.
recognizing that it's not simply a matter of, talking too fast or being rude.
Right.
There's a lot more going on beneath the surface.
And speaking of understanding, the article didn't just focus on the challenges.
Right.
It also offered some potential solutions.
It did.
We talked about sensory integration techniques and social skills training,
Mm-hmm.
but there was another piece, right?
Yes. Communication accommodations.
Yeah, tell me about that.
So this is all about creating environments and using strategies that make communication more accessible and less overwhelming for autistic individuals.
Okay.
And it starts with recognizing that communication isn't just about spoken words.
Right, like we often assume that conversation is the default way to communicate.
Exactly.
Right.
But there are so many other ways to express ourselves.
Cool.
So communication accommodations might involve using visual aids,
Okay.
like pictures or diagrams, to support understanding or encouraging written communication when verbal interaction feels too intense. It could also mean breaking down complex information into smaller chunks,
Yeah.
providing clear and concise instructions, or minimizing distractions in the environment.
So it's about being flexible and kind of adapting our communication style to meet the needs of the individual.
Exactly.
What other accommodations did the article suggest?
Well, one really interesting one was the use of technology.
Oh, yeah.
There are some amazing apps and devices out there that are specifically designed to support communication for autistic individuals.
Cool. Like what?
So there are text-to-speech apps that can help with reading and writing,
Oh, that's cool.
and there are visual supports apps that can provide prompts and reminders during social interactions.
Wow, technology can be such a powerful tool for accessibility.
It really can.
It's cool to see it being used in this way.
It is.
So what else can we do to create more inclusive and communication-friendly environments for autistic individuals?
Well, one of the most important things is to just be patient and understanding.
Yeah.
Recognize that communication might take a little longer,
Uh-huh.
that there might be some misunderstandings along the way, and that's okay.
Yeah.
It's about creating a safe space where individuals feel comfortable communicating in their own way without fear of judgment or pressure to conform.
Absolutely. That's such an important message.
It is.
Patience, understanding, acceptance.
Yes.
Those are the foundations of any truly inclusive environment.
Absolutely.
But the article also highlighted the importance of self-advocacy, right?
It did.
What does that look like in the context of pressured speech?
So self-advocacy is all about empowering autistic individuals to understand their own communication style and to advocate for their needs.
Okay.
This might involve explaining to others what pressured speech is,
Right.
how it feels, and what strategies or accommodations can help them communicate more effectively.
So it's about taking ownership of their communication
Exactly.
and finding ways to make it work for them
Yeah.
rather than feeling like they have to constantly adapt to everyone else's expectations.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense.
It does.
But self-advocacy can be challenging,
It can be.
especially for individuals who might already be struggling with social anxiety
Right.
or feeling overwhelmed in certain situations.
Absolutely.
What are some ways that we can support autistic individuals in developing those self-advocacy skills?
It really starts with fostering a sense of self-awareness.
Okay.
Encourage them to kind of reflect on their communication patterns. Like,
Mm.
when do they feel most comfortable communicating?
Yeah.
What situations tend to trigger pressured speech for them?
Right.
What strategies have worked in the past?
Mm.
Even simple things like journaling mindfulness exercises or just talking openly about these experiences can be incredibly helpful.
It's like laying the groundwork for understanding their own needs before trying to communicate them to others. And that makes me think about the role of like parents, educators, therapists, all those people who support autistic individuals.
Yeah.
What can they do to nurture self-advocacy?
Well, I think it's about shifting from a model of fixing to a model of empowerment.
Yeah.
Instead of speaking for them, we need to be equipping them with the tools and the language to speak for themselves.
It's powerful.
Things like role-playing different scenarios,
Mm-hmm.
practicing how to ask for accommodations,
Yeah.
maybe even creating visual aids or scripts that they can refer to.
Mm-hmm.
These are all really practical ways to build confidence and competence.
So it's not just about like telling them to advocate for themselves.
Right.
It's about giving them like concrete skills
Exactly.
and support to do it effectively.
Yes. And, this whole conversation about pressured speech
Yeah.
is really a much broader conversation about how we approach communication in general.
That's true.
It's about recognizing that there's no one right way to communicate and that, diversity in communication styles is something to be celebrated, not stifled.
I love that. And I think that's what I've really taken away from this whole deep dive.
Yeah.
Is like this reminder that we need to move beyond assumptions and really try to see the world through the eyes of others.
Exactly.
Who knows, we might even learn something about ourselves
Right.
and our own communication patterns along the way.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been an incredibly insightful conversation. I'm so glad we had the chance to dig into this.
Me too.
Is there anything from the article or just from our conversation today that's really stuck with you?
There is one line from the article that I keep coming back to.
Oh.
It says, when we listen with our hearts, not just our ears, we open the door to deeper understanding and connection.
That's beautiful.
And I think that's so true. That's
Yeah.
something I'm going to carry with me.
Absolutely. And I think that's a perfect note to end on.
It is.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into pressured speech in adults with autism.
Thanks for having me.
We hope you've learned something new and feel inspired to approach communication with a little more empathy and understanding. Until next time, keep diving deep and keep those conversations going.